tonight, our panel, the Conservative Business Secretary, Sajid Javid, Labour's Shadow Education Secretary, Lucy Powell, the Deputy Leader of UKIP, Paul Nuttall, the Managing Editor of The Sun, Stig Abell, and the writer and equality campaigner, Paris Lees. Thanks very much. And just before we start, remember, texting, tweeting, our hashtag's BBCQT. You can follow us at BBC Question Time. You can text us at 83981, push the red button to see what others are saying. Right. Our first question from Matthew Smith, please. Mr. Smith.
As David Cameron set his sights way too low in his renegotiation of Britain's membership of the European Union...
OK, we've had David Cameron's letter setting out his aims. Has he set his sights too low? Stig Abell.
He set his sights too low and he's missed, which is the tragic thing for him, which is the problem. I mean, the difficulty he has for Europe, he's a Europhile leading a bunch of Eurosceptics. The difficulty for the Labour Party is that they're led by a Eurosceptic leading a bunch of Europhiles. So the real problem we have is that the European situation is too big for British politics. We don't know how to deal with it at all. We have the Tories riven by it, Labour riven by it, UKIP have a coherent policy but they can't get elected for love nor money. So the British politics as it currently stands can't really deal with the European question. And the problem David Cameron has very obviously is that what he set out to try and achieve won't actually help the central problem on people's minds, which is how do we control immigration in this country? There's nothing to say that immigration is wrong and Britain is fired by immigration, it's powered by immigration. We're a nation of immigrants. But I think people in this country have an entitlement when they look at their elected representatives to say, you tell me what you believe in terms of immigration, and I'll hold you to account on what you then deliver. And that is absolutely impossible in the current political system.
And you think immigration is at the very heart of the debate about yes or no in the referendum?
I think
nothing else, not other controls.
I think that it's about sovereignty, it's about our place in the world, but it will boil down to a question of immigration, not whether immigration is good or bad, but whether we expect our British politicians to be able to offer an argument about whether to control it and to what extent.
OK. Sajid Javid.
The relationship we have with the EU today is not the one the British people voted for 40 years ago. It is hugely, hugely different, entirely different. And that's why we need reform. We need fundamental reform. The EU is on the wrong track. And what David Cameron set out this week in more detail, he's talked about it for a while, but he did set out in more detail, are just the kind of changes that we want to see. So, for example, as Business Secretary, I want business to do even better in Britain. I want it to create more jobs. I want to see more growth. But we're held back with the EU as it is. If it doesn't change, it's holding us back. It's not competitive enough. There's not enough free trade deals. There's too much red tape. So we need to change all these things.
Did he set his sights too low, was the question?
No. No, I think we've got a package. It's an ambitious package. There's 4 major parts to it. If we can achieve that, we can fundamentally change the relationship. And the only way we're actually going to get traction and get change is because we've called a referendum. Without a referendum, we wouldn't be sitting down there around the negotiating table with our European partners, even having this discussion. It's going to be a bumpy road. I'm not saying it's going to be easy to get this negotiation done, but we're on the right track and we can get it done.
OK. Let's hear from one or two men. You've got a lot of hands up already. You say in the front here.
What Cameron has asked for is a complete letdown. Especially on immigration. When we all came here tonight, we shut our front door so we would stop any Tom, Dick or any Henrietta coming into our house. What we've done as a nation, we've left that front door open, and we left it open to 450 million residents from the EU, and any of those could come here at any time at all. Last year, over 600,000 people, and that's just the official number, came into the UK. Right. We cannot go on like this, and the only way to stop it, is to ensure that we have control of our borders. The EU will not let us control our borders, so the only way we can do it is to vote to come out of the EU.
Lucy Powell.
Well, look, I'm afraid I don't agree with the last sentiments there, but, you know, I will be campaigning for and voting for Britain to stay in the European Union because I think our membership of the European Union makes us a more powerful, a more prosperous and a more secure country. I share the frustrations that people have. I share the frustrations that many people have. We do need to engage in reform in Europe, but reform in Europe should be an ongoing process, not a one-off event. It should be something we're demanding for and we're getting and we're negotiating on an ongoing basis. But the negotiations that David Cameron seems to have set out this week, I think, say a lot more about the negotiations he's having with his own backbenchers than any real negotiations he's having
where is
with
he
Europe.
at fault, and what would you have had in there which isn't there?
I think where he's at fault is that he's now playing a very high-risk game of roulette with the future of this country. He's unable to show the leadership that we need entering into this campaign about whether we stay in Europe or not. He's not really able to say which side of the fence he will be coming down on in that referendum. And Sajid is here this evening. He's the business secretary. He's supposed to be championing British business interests in this country. The vast majority of British businesses want to remain in the EU. He is not able to say whether he will be campaigning for us to stay in or not. This is the British government only a few months away from one of the biggest decisions that we are going to face as a country, and they are unable to tell you what they think about it.
OK, I'll come... Sajid Javid, perhaps just before we go on, you pick up on that point. Do you know which way you will go? You once said you wouldn't shed a tear if we left the EU. Is that still your view?
Well, I think we need fundamental change, and if we don't...
I know you said all that,
No,
but would you...
I'm answering your question. If we don't get change, if it's an unreformed EU, then I think the costs of staying in outweigh the benefits. That's why we need reform.
And so you could see yourself breaking away from the Cabinet and from David Cameron? Well, it would be that.
I can see myself campaigning for reform, which is what I'm doing now. We need to see the fundamental reform.
Can you see any circumstances where you would break away?
No, I'm going to campaign for reform, and then the decision will be made in a referendum. What my decision is a referendum depends on what the final package is, as the Prime Minister has said himself.
But
nothing is off the table.
He should have called that referendum once he knew.
No, but Lucy talks about, she said she wants some reform, but we're only having a discussion about reform because we're having a referendum. Your party didn't want a referendum. That's what you said before the election. Now you seem to want one. You need to make up your mind.
Well, we're having a referendum. We're having a referendum.
Against it.
But, you know, I'll give you an example. The negotiation position on limiting in-work benefits, that was a policy that the Labour Party adopted ahead of the last election. Hang on a minute, let me just finish. OK, but that was a policy that we developed before the last election, where we were going around Europe as opposition party, not as the government, and we were asking other countries in the EU Commission, would they negotiate on such a policy as David Cameron set out? They were happy to have those conversations. They said, and this was only a year ago, at that point they had heard nothing from the British government asking those same questions. So the Labour Party in opposition was having those conversations before David Cameron even was.
All right, let's hear from some members of ours. You said there. Yes, Steve.
Just like his manifesto on benefits, David Cameron's statement on the European Union is way too vague. I honestly think he's going to use this EU referendum to destroy workers' rights and give us an option of in without the social charter or out, and therefore destroy workers' rights, which is his and Javid's goal.
OK, and you in the front, in the second row. Yes?
No, I don't think that David Cameron has set his targets too low. Let's take, for example, immigration. Immigration is far too high, yes, we know that, it's far too high. But the immigrants, the migrants that come into the UK, they play their part in society. They do the jobs that the British people, that a minority of British people do not want to do. By these reforms, we are not bowing down to the European Union. We're showing that we are Great Britain. We are showing we are a democratic society. Immigration is too high. But the immigrants that come into the country, they do work.
OK. Paul Nuttall.
Well, I've looked at Mr Cameron's 4 points. You know, the first one, talking about non-Eurozone countries having equal access to the single market. The second, strengthening national parliaments. The third, cutting red tape. We've heard it all before, haven't we? Tony Blair was talking about cutting red tape 10 years ago, and the fourth point, denying benefits to EU migrants for 4 years. It ain't gonna happen. OK? It ain't going to happen. Donald Tusk has said it's going to be very, very difficult. Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the European Commission, thinks it breaks EU law. Martin Schulz, the President of the European Parliament, announced it within an hour of Cameron saying it. The real point here is what he hasn't asked for. There's nothing about the reduction of contributions, which are running at £55 million every single day. Nothing on the common agricultural policy,
Paul,
which is pushing up the price of food. No, David,
but hang
it's
on,
what
Paul,
he's
but
left
you
out.
said he's not going to get these points, so in that case, presumably he'll urge people to vote against, because these are his conditions for voting yes.
Hang on.
Well,
what he will do is he will try to perform the same trick that Harold Wilson pulled in 1975. He'll get cosmetic changes, come back to the British people and say, isn't it a great victory? There's not going to be any more harmonisation, no pooling of sovereignty. And what happened after that? Well, we had a single European Act which created a single market. We've got a flag, an anthem. The majority of our laws are now made in Brussels. We've got open borders. Ladies and gentlemen, hang on.
The British government agrees. Well, stop making a speech, Paul. I know you're used to making a speech.
Look, the bottom line is this. The con is on. Don't be fooled again like 1975. Let's rewrite that wrong.
All right, there we go. You stop there. Well done, Paul. Yes, you.
Will David Cameron learn a trick from the SNP and have a second referendum if the first one fails?
Sajid Javid, just briefly.
There'll only be one referendum. We need certainty, business needs certainty, and there's going to be one referendum.
Paris Lees.
I feel really sad hearing that there's so much anti-European Union feeling in the room, actually. I get it. I get that it's frustrating and all the red tape and everything. And of course, there's the dead wood that could be cut out with all these bureaucrats, and God knows, who gives them their authority or where they get their budgets from. So yeah, we need to see some change. But I think there's a more important point to be made, which is, I really think we're taking for granted what we've got. Like, have we forgotten what Europe, as it stands now, replaced? It replaced like 300 years of us being at war with one another, And we all know how the last one ended. So I think we live in an increasingly globalised world, and it may sound idealistic to say it, but I think we've all got to work together and we've got to pull together. But ultimately, we do need a referendum. It's up to the people to decide. And I really hope that we'll decide to stay part of it, because I really believe in that post-war dream of us all coming together and actually realising that we're all Europeans and that we can all work for our common benefit, in the same way that I want Britain to stay together and I don't want Scotland to leave. I want us to be together, not separate.
I think Paris is exactly right from an idealistic point of view, but you can make an argument that Europe has not solved the problem with Ukraine and Putin's warmongering. It has not solved the problem of the refugee crisis at a time when you expect a macro organisation like the EU to step in and say, here are our solutions. It has not managed to deliver them.
But hang on a minute. OK, so Russia's being very aggressive to Ukraine. That wouldn't happen between Britain and France now. Like, that is how it was for hundreds of years.
I don't think the EU stops war between Britain and France.
NATO stops wars, not
NATO,
not the European
Union. I'm going to... We'll have lots more on this as the referendum gets closer, whenever it's... Have an idea when it's going to be?
Yeah.
Oh, well done.
Before the end of 2017.
Before the Chilcot report.
I just want to go back to the question of Matthew Smith, who asked this in the first place. What's your view of what you've heard, and where do you stand on this?
It wasn't a particular question about immigration. It was more a concern about the lack of democracy within the European Union. And
you think that was the flaw in what Cameron is suggesting he renegotiates?
There's that, and the contribution levels, £12 billion a year, another £2 billion balancing payment, another £500 million when they overspend.
Of course, back in '75, when we had the referendum then, every country had a veto. All the members had a veto on any legislation. That's the thing that's changed in the years since.
That would be a key thing as well for me.
Yeah, that would be a good thing.
Yeah, it'd be a good thing.
27 vetoes.
Well, that way...
Wow. OK. Let's go on, because we have many questions.